All right, hello everyone. Once again, welcome to our webinar series on cap and trade compliance. CCG's opinion, of course, as we mention every time on a disclaimer, is our content and provided during this webinar for the sole purposes of our listeners, and we assume limited responsibility for the completeness and usefulness of the information. My name is Jean Paquin. I'm going to be your host today. And please take note that this webinar will be recorded. This webinar entitled Keys to a Cost-Efficient Compliance Strategy and How to Navigate the Cap and Trade Compliance Maze will be taking about 45 minutes and will include a Q&A period of about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the webinar. Please ask your question anytime during the webinar using the Q&A box provided to you, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. We might not be able to answer all the questions, though, because there's usually quite a lot from our audience and listeners. So what we will do is send you a Q&A follow-up later on during the course of the day or latest tomorrow morning. With me today, Carbon Consult expert David Beaudoin, who has long-standing expertise in the carbon world. And David has worked on carbon market compliance and quantification in GHG emissions for quite a long time for various types of projects. So hello, David.
Hi, Jean. Thank you very much for having me with you today again. It's always a pleasure to give these presentations along with you, and hopefully we will bring some value to our audience today.
Hopefully we will. So without further ado, let's now dive into the core of the topic. And with the new year now underway, the long debated cap and trade program has finally come into effect with a direct impact on all industrial sectors in Ontario. So while many companies foresee an increase in the cost of producing goods and services, others see this as an opportunity to do things differently and perhaps perform better than their competition. So our goal today is going to be to provide you with an insight into the dynamics of the carbon market. This webinar will speak to mandatory and voluntary participants as well as non-participants, GHG emitters, which are indirectly impacted. So with you, your host, again, myself, Jean Paquin, and David Beaudoin, Senior Project Manager for the Carbon Consult Group. Our objectives today is going to be threefold. First, we will highlight the role of participating at auction as part of the overall cap and trade strategy. And then we will discuss carbon prices and recent California-Quebec auction results. And third and final, we will also provide you with high-level recommendations on why and how to participate. Key dates to remember: March 10th is going to be a bid guarantees due to financial services administrators. So that will be March 10 in a few days from now. March 22nd, there will be a first auction for Ontario participants. It will take place between 1 and 4 Eastern Time. On April 26th and 27th, we will be at the Cap and Trade Forum in Ontario. There will be a Cap and Trade Forum taking place in Toronto. I have the great honor to be a chair for one of the panel called Lessons Learned from Quebec Market. And I will be there for that day on the 26th, I think it is, in the afternoon. But I'll be talking about it at the end of the webinar in more details. Finally, just on June 1st of this year, there will be a deadline for submitting your GHG emissions report covering your emissions for 2016. So without further ado, let me go to the acquisitions channels, and I will let our guest speaker, Mr. David Beaudoin, talk about this in details.
All right, thank you very much, Jean. Again, the main topic of the webinar today will be to discuss participation at auction, which clearly is and will be the main means of acquisition of GHG allowances for most participants to the cap and trade, either in Ontario, Quebec, or California. But it's good to remember that there are other means of acquiring allowances. Some of you have received free allowances from the government. Some might be looking at GHG offsets from GHG offset project proponents. There's also direct government sale, which typically is to be avoided because most of the allowances being traded there will be at a much higher price than what we usually observe at auction and other means of acquisition. There is also opportunities to trade with other participants and perform over the counter trading. And there's also some exchange and clearing houses where you can trade on a daily basis. So really the message here is that participating at auction should be part of your strategy and clearly is the main means of acquisition for most of you, but it should be seen as one of the tools to comply to your obligations regarding the cap and trade. And there are other ways to acquire these allowances that might minimize the risk for your organization and reduce the overall cost of compliance. Now, when we speak of participating at an auction, really there are two ways that most of you will be able to get some allowances from those auctions. The first one is direct participation. Like many of you will be preparing your own strategy and register to the auction and place your own bids. While for some other participants, and we've seen that with some of our clients, you may want or have looked at the possibility to delegate to a third party the participation at an auction. So the third party in that case will act on your behalf and acquire allowances for your organization and other organizations that are doing businesses with them. So really this is some kind of one-size-fits-all approach. It's not a tailored strategy for your own organization. There are administrative costs and commission that comes with it. It is rather a simplistic approach, but it does bring some simplicity and makes your life easier, and is usually adequate for organizations that need only small volumes of allowances. You typically will have much less flexibility on volumes and price for bids. So whatever your specific situation, we do have advices for you in this webinar. And one of them is that it's worth assessing what is your best option, either directly participating at auction or delegating your participation to a third party. Now we want to look at some of the key results from the last auction that occurred on February 22nd on the carbon market, on the joint market of Quebec and California. As most of the recent auctions, the final price that the allowances were sold at was the reserve price of $17.84 Canadian dollars. But one of the main or of the most important fact from that auction is that we've seen a very low participation from different participants to the cap and trade, which resulted in a very low percentage of all the allowances available being sold. So really only 18% of the current vintages, of the current vintage allowances being available were sold at that auction, and even less for the future vintage. So yeah, we've seen a very low participation rate for this auction, and we've seen, and you might have seen over the media and many sources of information out there, different kind of explanations and reasons for this low participation. And some have claimed that it's some kind of dramatic situation for the whole market, and that brings very high uncertainty. We have some potential explanation to it that we will look at in a second. But before that, we want to also highlight the dynamic that we've observed at the last auction and the previous one. So this is a graph where we see the number of participants from Quebec, the number of participants from California also, and the percentage of all allowances being sold at the different auctions since Q4 2015. And what we see on this graph is that, well, of course, the orange line represents the Californian participant. And this one, it does fluctuate a lot over time. So we've seen as many as 80 participants a few years ago, and only barely more than 30 participants from California participating at the auction in February this year. While when we look at the participation from Quebec, it is much more stable over time. And what we see also is that the percentage of allowances being sold is correlated with the participation of Californian participants, which makes sense. California is a much bigger market. There are much larger players on that market. And of course, through the numbers of participants, they drive, they actually drive the overall acquisition of allowances during those auctions. So if we look at the explanations for those facts and those results at the recent auctions, one of the explanations that we often see and that you might have heard about is the uncertainty that comes from California. Thing is that some California participants are afraid that the market can actually collapse due to a lawsuit occurring over there, claiming that the cap and trade might be non-constitutional. So there's a lawsuit that tried to prevent the cap and trade to continue. So of course that brings some uncertainty in the market, and mainly for California participants. And some have decided to at least temporarily pull out of the market. But that really puts them in a risky position, given that if the lawsuit fails and the cap and trade continue over there, they will experience a dramatic shortage of allowances, and that will cost them a lot more to comply to their obligations to cap and trade. So that's one of the explanation that you have heard, and that clearly plays a role here. But there are some other potential explanations that occur also, and one of them is maybe, as opposed to what we've heard over time, maybe there is an oversupply of allowances on the market. While, for example, in Quebec, since the beginning of that cap and trade in 2013, we've heard that the market was, in contrary, undersupply, and there would be needs for allowances from California. What we see actually from the last graph is that not so many participants are active at the auction, roughly an average of 25 per auction out of more than 100 participants overall. So what we see from that is maybe some or even most of the participants, industrial and petroleum product suppliers, might have already enough allowances in their account. So really that's contrary to what we've heard over time, but only time will let us know whether this is true or not. But this is to be kept in mind. And finally, another explanation, at least for participants from Quebec, there is currently an unfavorable exchange rate with the US dollar. And we've seen that some Quebec companies expect a better exchange rate occurring at a later stage this year, and they simply are waiting for the exchange rate to be better and expect this exchange rate to drive the reserve price down, and then the final price or settling price to be better for them. So really the combinations of those three explanations might explain the recent results at the auction. And it's not only one of them or two of them, it's probably a combination of those three high-level explanations that drive this dynamic right now. So, well, What's important to note is if you've been looking at and you've been hearing that uncertainty in the market, and that you've been thinking, oh, maybe I should wait also on my side and see what will happen with that lawsuit in California, and if Quebec participants are waiting to see what's occurring with this, maybe I should do the same in Ontario. Really, what you need to know and what you have to keep in mind at this point is, no matter what's going to happen in California, that might not affect the dynamic in Ontario. In the moment, the Ontario market and the California market are not linked, even though there is an expectation to be linked during the year of 2018. They are not yet, and there is no obligation for them to be linked at any stage. So even though the market collapsed over there and the cap and trade program is cancelled, that doesn't mean that Ontario will follow up with this, and the actual cap and trade program in Ontario will remain. So if you're wondering, should I participate or not at the auction, given these late results, we strongly encourage you to do participate at auction and do prepare an overall cap and trade strategy, no matter what's the situation over there. So that's really the first advice that we have for you, is to participate at that auction. And the earlier, the better. Really, many players in Ontario, some of our clients and many organizations that we have spoken with, are simply not ready to participate. They don't have their overall strategy planned out yet, so they just decide to postpone their participation in the first auction. And our advice to this is, well, it's good that you are looking at developing an overall strategy, a long-term strategy, and we're there to assist them to do this. But in the meantime, opportunities in this market don't come and go very, very easily or often. And if you don't participate in that first auction, there are opportunities to acquire allowances at very low prices, given that many participants won't participate. And these kind of opportunities won't return. So it's kind of potentially an early bird savings for you if you do participate at this first auction occurring 3 weeks from now. Another advice that we might have, and you really need to look further into it, is to place various bids, and not only one. And that's a common mistake that many participants do at their first participation at auction, is that they will establish their budget based on either what they have collected from their clients since the beginning of the year, or based on their expectation of what the price will be during the year. And they will establish the number of allowances that they need, and based on that budget that they have established, provide a single bid. So even though it's true that some of those participants claim that it's impossible for them to afford acquiring allowances at $1, $2, or even $3 more than what they've expected, what we've seen in the past is that these kind of participants can even afford less to remain without allowances in their hand at the end of a given auction. So that's what placing various bids allow you to do. Is of course you want to acquire allowances at the lowest price as possible, but you also prefer to have some allowances in your pocket, in your account, even though they have cost you a little more than what you've expected. So typically we see at least 5 different bids level being minimal, but really the more bids, the better. And what we also have as advice for you is to consider future vintages, especially at this first auction, because future vintages being sold during an auction are always vintage that are from 3 years later than the current year of the auction occurring. Meaning we're in 2017, so there are current vintage of 2017 being sold, but you will also have the opportunity to acquire allowances from vintage 2020. And that's a very rare occasion because 2020 is the last year of the first compliance period. So it's for the only time in the cap and trade program, the first compliance period is a 4-year period. So that's the only time that you will be able to acquire future vintages that are actually available for the same compliance period as the current vintage. So if you're planning to need allowances in 2020 and have the opportunity to acquire them right now, really it's a rare opportunity, and they have the exact same value as current vintages, and you should be looking into that opportunity. So a good plan for the auction is an important part for your overall compliance strategy. And yes, participating at the auction is one of the means, but again, it should be part of a much longer, long-term plan for you to comply to your cap and trade obligations. We have here some numbers of the selling price over time, and what we see is a general trend, upward trend, that is mainly driven by the increase in the reserve price rate. And well, we should expect that price to remain at least for the first auction occurring in 3 weeks from now.
So let me take on from the keys. Thank you very much, David. This is honestly really very thorough and very complete, and some of you might have questions at this stage, and we invite you to send them out. We've already received a few questions, so we'll answer it at the end. I think the takeaway here from what you've talked about, David, is should we participate or not at the auction at an early stage, and whether or not California reflects the actual the low volume reflects the actual let's say structure and viability of the market. I think it does, and we think it does, certainly. And David mentioned something very very enlightening here. Of course, the fact that the Ontario market is not connected really with the California-Quebec market at this stage, the obligation is still there. So again, participating, having a plan to participate at the next auction is important. It's also important because prices might, as any open market behavior, might reflect a higher price at a later stage. And of course, participating at this stage with a lower price is always a benefit from an economical and financial standpoint. So, and then we take also away the fact that auction is one thing, is one way, one route, one path for industries and organizations, but there's also many other routes, many other options for them outside the auction, cap and trade auction market. These are the keys to an effective compliance strategy that we've kind of put forward to reflect that. And of course, you have to look at all possible options on the market. That's fairly that's a given. And all these options are away from, let's say, opportunities that you have away from the market, such as over-the-counter trading or negotiating with other participants. So as a second bullet here, we have to get in touch with market participants. We recommend for organizations to share their experiences and talk about the possible transactions. As a buyer or a seller, if you have some extra credits that your organization, because of an adequate carbon measure and compliance strategy, have succeeded in having an extra, you can always share these credits with the market. as a third bullet here, we talk about networking with offset credits proponents. So, of course, it's important to know these people. It's important to know where to call, who to talk to, and of course, we can certainly help as a partner in this market, and knowing with our extended network, we can certainly help you connect with those who have offset credits available. We monitor, and you have and should monitor the market signals as well. Market signals are not only at the auction, they're on a regular basis. They're in the news constantly, and they're available, and they should be monitored very, very carefully, because they reflect, being an open market, of course, they reflect the behavior of the participants. And as a last bullet and advice on a compliance strategy, we would say plan ahead. Know what you will need and look at the market trends. So just be aware that there is a market trend. We see it, I think David was clear in explaining through the graph that there is a volume effect, but there's also a strategy in terms of who is going to behave and when, and you have to follow those trends, because of course buying at a low demand could perhaps give you access to lower price credits and make this a financial in this operation more economical for your organization. So opportunities arise from smart planning and strategy. You just have to look long term, and you have to look at all your options on the market. So just again, coming back to the Cap and Trade Forum, we have, again, I said that at the beginning, I'll be chairing a panel on April 26th in Toronto in the afternoon on lessons learned from Quebec. It's going to be a very interesting panel, because the best practices are going to be discussed. And Quebec market is a market that's in place since 2013. So there'll be talks about all of the strategies that were taken by some organizations, and that, of course, will bring insight as to what overviews of companies' concerns are, and there'll be, of course, many stakeholders present from the government, the industry, and the legal sector as well. So there'll be a great opportunity for all of you to discuss during these 2 days. And we're lucky enough to be able to offer you also a discount there. So there's a discount code if you need to participate. There's a 20% off, and you have the link as well there. We'll be given a next webinar on April 4th of this year. So this is a webinar series again, and we'll be doing that on a regular basis, likely to be on a monthly basis. And the idea, of course, is because the market is following up, and the market is bringing a lot of information and needs an update and information on a regular basis. We want to provide you with quality information on a regular basis. There'll also be the results of the auctions that will be. Of course, next auction will be, I think, if I'm not mistaken, March 22nd. I want to be careful with that. Yes, it is. And we'll bring on that during that webinar the results and interpretation of that first auction in Ontario. So this is the end of our webinar from a presentation perspective. We'll jump into the numerous questions and answers that we have, the Q&As. Some very interesting questions that I'll be reading out to you. And David, you will have the hard task of answering them on the spot. So let's start with this one here. For a petroleum product supplier, do you see a typical threshold of yearly emissions at which it makes sense to outsource the acquisition of allowances?
Yeah, so I kind of was expecting this kind of question, since we discussed the two types of participation in auction, right? Either the direct participation or delegating your participation to a third party. Well, the answer to that question is there a typical threshold of yearly emissions at which it makes sense to delegate? Well, yes. Well, typically, for organizations that need less than, let's say, 5 to 8,000 tons of allowances per year. That's a typical range for which it starts to make sense. For organizations with higher number of or higher emissions per year, we strongly recommend, and we do actually for many of our organizations, we recommend to look in the direct participation at auctions. That being said, no matter what is your situation, it's really a case by case assessment that needs to be performed to establish whether it's a good thing for you to delegate the participation to a third party. It depends on numerous factors that we won't go through right now, but it includes resources available. It includes the means that from which you are budgeting the acquisition of allowances. It depends also on the market that you're in and what your competitors are doing. So if it's important for you to compete and perform better than your competitors, etc., etc. But yes, usually below 5,000 tons per year, it often makes sense to do so.
Thank you, David. Next question we have from our attendees and listeners. I plan to participate to only one auction per year. Do you think it is the right approach? Again, just a reminder before we answer this question, for those of you who have more questions, please click on the Q&A button and you can ask your question, and we'll be following up during the course of this webinar, or else we will be sending you the results of the questions answered shortly after. Please, David, can you answer that?
Yeah, so planning to participate to only one auction per year. Again, it depends on your overall long-term strategy. And to be quite honest, this is something that we often observe on the market. We've seen many organizations in Quebec and California participating at only one auction a year, or even less actually. Some have participated to only one or two during the course of a compliance period. The thing is, for most of those participants that don't participate much at auction, they do it because they don't have a long-term plan. It's just that they wait at the end of a year or compliance period. They look at, okay, what are my needs now? And then they register and participate at the next auction. And really, that's not the optimal approach to minimize the risk and reduce your cost. And that is likely what might occur, again, from the results that we've observed at the last auction. Only 18% of all allowances being available were sold, meaning, well, if participants are waiting till the end of the year, well, all those participants will be on the auction platform at the same time, which clearly will bring the price of the auction up. So that's why we otherwise encourage participation at all of the auctions most of the time, and not only that, but also to place several bids during a given auction.
Thank you, David. Another question coming from our listeners. I am a participant in Ontario, and should I buy allowances in or on the Quebec-California market?
Well, that's a very good question. Actually, we've seen organizations doing it for several years already. Some organizations based in Ontario who are expecting the cap and trade program coming in, they went on the Quebec-California market to acquire allowances at actually a lower price because it was at an earlier stage. It is a valuable approach. However, it is still some kind of riskier approach at the same time because, again, the two markets aren't linked yet. So yes, there is a firm intention from the government to go forward with the linkage of these two markets. But at this stage, allowances from Quebec and California cannot be used on the Ontario market. So our recommendation at this point is to remain on the Ontario market if you have not yet participated in the Quebec-California market.
Okay. Another question. How do you think the outcome of the California lawsuit will affect Ontario cap and trade?
That's a long debated question. We kind of saw light in October or November of last year when the lawsuit was about to be canceled or to be abandoned. So we thought we would have to deal with that reality for 2017, and that Ontario wouldn't have to worry about this situation in California. But the truth is, well, this lawsuit is still going on, and we don't know the final result of that lawsuit, and we don't know what impact it will have on the cap and trade market in California. So how this may affect the reality in Ontario, really the important thing to notice and to be aware of right now is, again, the two markets aren't linked. And even if they are linked, or they're expected to be linked in the future, in terms or from a regulation perspective or a law perspective, the two markets don't need to be linked. So even though the California market fails and is abandoned, it is likely that both Quebec and Ontario will continue with their cap and trade program, and we will, well, you as participants will need to fulfill your obligations.
Very good. We'll take a few more questions. We have one here, very interesting. Do you provide verification quantification services? Well, I think I can answer this. We do provide quantification services, but we do not provide verification services. There's an independency issue here, and there's would be a conflict of interest, of course, if both services would be provided by the verification party, the party who has previously done the quantification. GHG reports are due by June 1st, by the way, so of course quantification will have to be done for the year 2016. That comes rapidly, so just to let you know, you should start thinking about this obligation for your organization. Another question here, what is the cap and trade forum added value? So I don't know, do you want to answer this, or I can answer that?
No, go ahead. I mean, you'll be the one sharing.
Yeah, maybe I should start answering some questions here. So of course, the added value of this forum will be meeting and talking to people who have, I guess, the same needs and obligations, and probably the same questions, right? So you'll be sharing with other stakeholders their thoughts and their idea and their strategy. There's going to be a lot of people from different necks of the woods, right? From the government to legal and finance CEOs and CFOs and all those important people in management who have to take decision on what their strategy is going to be. So it's going to be a great opportunity to manage and talk about carbon exposure, the trading, the offset strategy as well, and of course some business opportunities as usual. In our case, we'll be speaking with some of the I think we're talking to a mine at one point, and also to some companies in Quebec who have in the past, of course, had the obligations as large compliers to offset. So it'll be interesting to hear what their experience are at this stage. That will be again on April 26th and 27th in Toronto. Maybe a last question here, and then we'll finish it off from there, and then we'll send you, again, as a reminder, we'll send you some of the questions and answer on a separate document that will be followed up a little bit later on during the course of the day. So it says, as a petroleum product supplier, I need to increase my sales price to collect money for auctions. What increase do you suggest? David?
Well, that refers to the overall message that we convey all the time, is really to be able to determine the price that you will be charging your clients. you'll need to be able to at least estimate the overall cost of compliance for your specific organization. And that can only be determined through an assessment and the establishment of an overall cap and trade compliance strategy. You can go on an ongoing basis and simply base your expectations of the price on the results of the last auction. But that is a simplistic approach, and that is what certainly some of your competitors do. However, if you have if you have a long-term plan and strategy, and have the ability to go outside the auction market and go in the secondary market and perform other type of transaction, either on the exchange or over-the-counter transaction, or even be able to acquire GHG offsets, well, that's how you can reduce your overall cost of compliance and minimize the price that you are charging to your clients. So with the first auction coming in, really it's becoming critical for organizations to establish a long-term plan and see how this participation at an auction fit within your overall strategy. And that's the recommendation that we would have for you, is the price that you have to set to as an increase must be in line with your compliance strategy to the cap and trade.
Okay, David, thank you very much for this information and the answer to this question. Numerous questions today, again, as usual, while presenting again another part of our webinar series on cap and trade compliance. Would like to remind you the message, the important takeaways today. You can, of course, contact us anytime if you need to have additional advice and information. That is something we've noticed. The market last year specifically was a little bit colder on communicating and talking about these issues, but now with the obligation on the table, the market, the organizations, and the participants are, of course, more keen in understanding how to prepare, put forward their strategy, and we are, of course, there to help. This is a critical time. We don't like to bear bad news, but fortunately we have to sometimes, by looking at all the issues at stake and all the changes and dynamics of the market. We notice that, of course, this is a critical time. It's not 5 to midnight yet, but it's getting close to. These obligations are on the table. The market is open. This is all official business, and it's big business at it. So we're definitely asking you or letting you know that you have to take a look at this with in a very critical manner and with a very critical approach in establishing a long-term strategy for your organization. The first auction will be on March 22nd. So this is around the corner. And we will also follow up with our webinar series on April 4th, where we will be talking about the results and perhaps giving you some ideas to why and what the market dynamic was all about. And there will be, again, a cap and trade forum in April, on April 26 and 27 in Toronto. We certainly invite you to go there. If you visit our website, you can register directly, or you can register on the cap and trade forum platform, which I think the link is in our presentation, which, by the way, we will be leaving on our website, and we will be sending you that information shortly, along with a Q&A follow-up. So thanks again for having taken part of this fantastic webinar series, and we hope to see you soon again with more questions, and hopefully we can answer them and follow up with you. Thank you very much for your presence, and have a wonderful day.